What is up, ladies and gentlemen of the online Jamily? JamiroFan 2000 here with yet another episode of JamiroFan Talks About. This time, a part two of an omnibus looking at the complete unreleased QUAI history of all Jamiroquai's unreleased music from the last 32 years. Just as a little bit of a backstep, this was originally intended to be a one video shot episode around 40 minutes in length, so I decided to split it into two parts because simply the video was over 40 minutes long and it would have rendered at hours and hours long. So I decided to cut it into two parts, and so here's part two of my omnibus of a JamiroFan Talks About, looking at the unreleased QUAI, the unreleased music of Jamiroquai. I hope you enjoyed that part one and this part two, and I'll see you around. Now, Jamiroquai's popularity kind of started to dissipate after Synchronized because Sony Music put a little bit of too much promotions money behind that album, because Traveling on Moving was a monumental mainstream breaking album for them, with Jamiroquai shifting nearly 7 to 11 million units around the world of that said album. So when Synchronized came along, Jamiroquai was really amping up the boogie factor on that new album of Synchronized, and ultimately would lead to one of the most polarizing moments in the history, or the Jamiro history as I lovingly call it, of Jamiroquai, where the separation of former Jamiroquai bassist Stuart Zender and Jamiroquai would happen, and he would end up leaving the band outright and going and working on other musical projects. Deferring opinions on this very polarizing moment in Jamiro history, as it dealt with women, money, what have you. And I will respectfully not speculate any further on what the justification was, that because there's three sides to every story, so I'll let that hopefully be addressed in the future by the band members in question of Jamiroquai, Stuart and Jay, to talk about it in their own time. But there were interviews done in that time period where the picture was not painted very rosy on the part of Stuart Zender, and on the part of JK. A little bit of JK addressing this issue did happen in a very rare press junket in the country of Sao Paulo, Brazil, when Jamiroquai had gone down there for a South American tour leg of Synchronized, and they just so happened to have audition and pick a new bassist in Nick Fife. So kind of an awkward position for Nick Fife in the middle of that press junket, that a member of the media there would directly ask JK about this, and like I said, he gave his side of that story. So hopefully future time will tell on when these band members decide to come out and fully address this from both of those points of views, and some reconciliation can happen. But I digress completely away from these unreleased QUAI tracks of the Synchronized into the early AFO era for Jamiroquai. So let's get into it. And coincidentally, I'm going to be talking about a scrapped album by Synchronized. And in 1997 to 1998, after that aforementioned explanation of the separation of Stuart Zender from Jamiroquai, JK decided to scrap the whole Synchronized album, the bass work, and everything that they had progressed up to that point of that separation between Stuart Zender and Jamiroquai from the band, into like I said, the album got completely scrapped. So let me give you a little bit more additional backstory and context on why that album from Synchronized got scrapped, which I did cover at the beginning of this portion of this episode of JamiroFan Talks About Omnibus. During one of the most turbulent times of Jamiroquai as a band, the Synchronized album sessions would mark the unexpected departure of Jamiroquai bassist, aforementioned Stuart Zender, from the band. Reasoning for this departure or firing from Jamiroquai from both parties would range, like I said, hearsay from issues of money, royalty, and women, but no concise reasoning had been come to a consensus. Ultimately, JK decided to literally scrap the whole Synchronized album progress at that point, or at least the Zender contributed bass work of that album Synchronized, and require a complete re-record of the whole album with a replacement bassist taking over a majority of those album sessions. None of the original scrapped Synchronized album session recordings have ever been heard or released to the online Jamily or have leaked, and probably will forever sit in the proverbial Buffalo Man-shaped Jamiroquai musical vault until they hopefully come out later on in probably a retrospective Jamiroquai box set, which I think the band is due for releasing sometime in the near distant future. But, we will leave our speculation on when that will actually be released. And now we move on to the next album period for the Unreleased of QUAI. In this episode, JamiroFan talks about Omnibus for the time period of the year 2000 to 2003, of the latter going into the new sound period of Jamiroquai's musicology. Now we're into the 2000 to 2003 era of the Unreleased of QUAI, the unreleased music of Jamiroquai. On this special episode, JamiroFan talks about Omnibus. Now, the first two songs for this countdown of the unreleased music of this time period, the Funk Odyssey period, would be for a pair of songs which had their debut on the 2002 Funny during the Asian to Australia tour leg of the Funk Odyssey tour, which would only get 3 airings individually on 3 separate concerts between Australia and Japan during the 2002 tour period. And the names of the songs are Cannibalists and A Funk Odyssey. Yes, A Funk Odyssey did have a title track that got aired live, but somehow didn't make it onto the final cut of the track list for Jamiroquai's 2001 album, A Funk Odyssey, which would mark a major musical shift for Jamiroquai's overall sound. So let me give you a backstory on the first track of these 2 tracks, Cannibalists. One of the 2 songs that made a live debut during the Pan-Asian Australian wing of the Funk Odyssey World Tour of 2002. Probably the first new Jamiroquai song talking about their love of Chiba since their 1994 single, Space Cowboy. This playful but very rocky song would sadly never be released in the future Jamiroquai albums, but nevertheless was the better of the 2 rare songs to make their live debut during that tour leg of 2002. Now let's move on to A Funk Odyssey. This was a title track that was a little more on the funk side, the Cannibalist, but it was also a blistering work-in-progress track, which was absolutely awesome. And it was cool, and it was really cool because up to that point, for nearly, I want to say 8 to 9 years, Jamiroquai had not live debuted any work-in-progress songs of them live on the road, but ultimately both of those songs would never see the light of day beyond their live airings in that 2002 Pan-Asian Australian tour of the Funk Odyssey World Tour of 2003. And we come up to yet another unreleased song from this time period, but was from a one-off gig in Stork in the year of 2003 of a song called Just Can't Get Enough, parentheses, Disco Nights. This was only performed once in the 2003 tour during their tour date in Stork. This was probably the most unexpected, rare, unreleased disco song, live song that Jamiroquai ever aired live. It was a marvelous callback to the disco era, but this unreleased live song would see another light, influencing the future Jamiroquai track Time Won't Wait in 2005 from their 6th album release, their final album release with Sony on the album Dynamite. Now, another song which did technically get an official release, but was part of a promotion for a CD, was for a song. Actually, let me correct myself here. This was yet another unreleased song. My notes are in a weird place, so please excuse me on that omission there. But this track in question was called Shoot the Moon and was only performed once by Jamiroquai during the 2003 tour. Now, here's a little backstory on that song. Shoot the Moon was another live showcase unreleased track by Jamiroquai on tour in 2003. A little more snappy on tempo and heavy on the Matt Johnson Helm synth and Rob Harris twang guitars. This was yet another song that should have had a second life in future releases, but alas, it was not in the cards. This song would be debuted in 2003 at the Montrose Jazz Festival, but yet again another fan favorite song of an unreleased song that would not make it past its original airing, of course, at Montrose Jazz Festival in 2003. And now we move on to one of the crown jewels that actually got leaked, and I did do a mini jam editorial, which has been my recurring series of Jamiroquai op-eds or opinionated articles talking about this test pressing in question. But this was one of the greatest leaks, at least in an online sense, of unreleased Jamiroquai material to make it online in 2003. Now, this leak somewhere between 2001 to 2003 did happen online, and this time this was a very, very significant leak because this was of a primordial version of an album which had not been regularly experienced by members of the online family, but this was called a UK test pressing. It was for the album A Funk Odyssey, which of course was Jamiroquai's 5th album release under Sony Music. But what was so rare about this UK test pressing was a lot of the songs were still very rough draft. They had not been in a mix or anything. But this whole thing got leaked online sometime between 2001 to 2003. It was simply known as the Funk Odyssey UK test pressing. But what was some of the key features of this test pressing were as follows: an uncut version of "Feels So Good" of the track "Feels Good," an extra percussions version of the lead track "Little L," the "You Give Me Something" uncut version, interludes 1 through 3, which were incidental moments of JK playing around with a vocalizer, and very interesting little fragments, audio fragments. Main vein, a no vocals uncut version, 2001 uncut version, Stop Don't Panic uncut version, Picture of My Life vocal variation uncut version, and Black Crow vocal variation uncut version. Let me give you the full backstory on this test pressing leak. In one of the most unprecedented online musical leaks in Jamiroquai discography history, Jamiroquai's UK test pressing for their album A Funk Odyssey leaked online 2001. Some people say it was leaked prior to the release of A Funk Odyssey, but ultimately I did more research. It turned out it came out in 2003 after the fact of the release of 2001's A Funk Odyssey. And the test pressing is usually a blueprint pressing of a prospective new album done by a record label or publishing company, awaiting final confirmation from artists to go full ahead into full manufacture and inevitable release of said album to the consumer public. Now, in the case of this test pressing of AFO, this version of the album featured uncut versions, aforementionedly, alternate edit versions, and rare unheard interludes of the album tracks, only originally meant to be privy to the ears of the record label and the publishing company, and of course the artists that make that music. The most notable highlights of this AFO test pressing were the track Interlude 2, aka Beatbox, where JK was vocally beatboxing with a vocalizer, which would later on actually become the bassline influence for a latter single. Of course, Dynamite's lead single, Feels Just Like It Should. That interlude would end up becoming the bassline for Feels Just Like It Should in 2005. And this was like I said, this was a very rare moment that the Jamley got to see behind the velvet curtain, at least in the studio making process for the band Jamiroquai. And like I said, if you know how to use the internet, you can easily find this test pressing for yourself in your searchings, probably via Google. But now we're moving on yet to another musical era for the special JamiroFan Talks About Omnibus of the Unreleased Of QUAI, the Unreleased Music of Jamiroquai, the complete Unreleased Music of Jamiroquai for the time period of 2010 to 2016. And now we come into the Rock to Slide Star album era of Jamiroquai here on this omnibus episode of JamiroFan Talks About of the Unreleased QUAI, the unreleased music of Jamiroquai over the last 32 years. Now, these two songs in this portion of this episode of JamiroFan Talks About Omnibus is going to be looking at a pair of songs, one of which we do have a little bit of audio from of Jamiroquai in the studio working on it, the second of which is only in hearsay. So let me give you a little bit of context on these. The first song was originally called Superhighway, which comes from the time period of 2010 during the Rock to Slide Star album era. The only appearance of this prospective unreleased song from the 2010 album Rock the Slide Star album period would emerge in a BTS or behind-the-scenes video of the band working on the music for the album released in 2010 that would make its way onto Jamiroquai HQ official social media. Only a passing glance of this song is being performed in this BTS video scene, and is purely written on a whiteboard of them in the studio of all the prospective songs that are hopefully going to make in the final lineup of Jamiroquai's aforementioned 2010 album Rock the Slide Star. And it's very interesting to always witness Jamiroquai in the studio, even in this rare documentarian video of them in their element, bouncing off ideas for their new music as they work hard in the studio. Now, the second song, as I aforementioned, is called Your Window is a Crazy Television, and is no audio of this studio song was ever aired, even in that documentary, as I just mentioned, but it was actually noted on that whiteboard, as I said, in that very rare documentary of Jamiroquai working on Rock the Slide Star in the Chillington studio. But let me give you a little backstory on Your Window is a Crazy Television. This is yet another unreleased song from the 2010 Rock the Slide Star album sessions to remain on the cutting room floor from its album release. No video footage or audio of this unreleased song exists, but it was rumored back in the year 2010 to be intended as a bonus track on the deluxe album edition of Rock the Slide Star in the country of release of France. But nothing ever materialized of that song, sadly. But there you go. Those are the songs of the Rock the Slide Star era. So let's move on to the next and last portion of the Jamiroquai JamiroFan Talks About omnibus of the Unreleased Music of Quai with the Automaton era. Now, the Automaton era for Jamiroquai, their second album released through their Universal Music Group, was a bit of an amazing return to form musically for Jamiroquai. They had returned back to a bit of their Futura funk, as I like to refer to it, with a lot of EDM and electronic musical influence. And this period would see Jamiroquai get very, very revitalized, at least in their new song era. And so I'm going to be talking about two songs from this album era between 2017 to 2020 in this special Omnibus episode of JamiroFan Talks About. The first track of which was called Street Fighter. This was an instrumental that was played many times during the 2018 to 2019 tour leg period of the Automaton tour for Jamiroquai. And the time period of this recording is sometime between 2016 to 2017 during the Automaton album era. Let me give you a little bit of backstory on Street Fighter. This unreleased instrumental from the 2016 to 2017 Automaton album sessions era would funnily find its way, as I said, as live debut music, as intro music, before the band took the stage at various live gigs during the Automaton World Tour of 2018 through 2019. Street Fighter would have its first intro music live debut at Jamiroquai's appearance at the Montreux Jazz Festival in the year 2018, and would be used periodically throughout the rest of the tour between 2018 and 2019. Now, I did check with a band member on this song in question. I did check with Jamiroquai keyboardist Matt Johnson, but he did mention that there is a longer vocal version of Street Fighter that exists, but is yet to see the light of day or be used in future touring as intro music or anything in release history for the band Jamiroquai. Now, the next song, the unreleased song, is yet another instrumental, but came from a very unorthodox origin. This song in question was called Emergency 2020 and was an instrumental. The time period of this unreleased instrumental was from the year 2020. Let me give you a little backstory on Emergency 2020. This unreleased instrumental believed to have been composed purposely for this art exhibition, which was only heard and released as part of a UTA Art Space mixed media art exhibition entitled Emergency Planet Earth, in a time close to now, which many eagle-eyed members of the Jamily will know was the first words on the classic Jamiroquai music video from 1993 for Emergency Planet Earth. This art exhibition, which took place for a limited time in the year 2020 out in Los Angeles, California, featured many art pieces about the current state of environmentalism, including the J.K. and Matt Johnson penned instrumental track called simply Emergency 2020. It was part of this official art exhibition's soundtrack that played when people went into the exhibition and looked at all the various mixed media artwork of this exhibition. Sadly, this track in question, this instrumental, sadly passed upon past queries on if this unreleased Jamiroquai instrumental would be released sometime in the near future. The organizers of the exhibition said it wouldn't be released due to licensing reasons, so it was only played that one time as part of that art exhibition at that time. But in passing, I asked Matt Johnson of Jamiroquai, who's been a great source for confirmations or anything. I had to ask him about the composition side of Jamiroquai. But in passing, it should be noted, Jamiroquai keyboardist Matt Johnson did know that a vocal version of Emergency 2020 instrumental does exist, but is yet to be released officially by Jamiroquai after the year of 2020. And now we come to probably the last of the unreleased Jamiroquai songs I've discussed in this very long-winded episode, the special Omnibus episode of JamiroFan Talks About. And of course, it was going to be part of a gimmick or something that Jamiroquai had planned to do, but didn't follow through after one song release. And this was during it was supposed to be the first of a series of rare songs to be shared from the Rock to Star album sessions of 2008 through 2009, and this was the only song to be released on the official Jamiroquai social media, at least in the regards of YouTube. And this song in question is called Now We Are All Alone. Now, this song in question was from the album session period of Rock to Star sometime between 2008 to 2009, so let me give you a little backstory on it. Back in 2018, this first demo was intended to be the beginning of a series of unreleased tracks and material announced at JK during a Happy Holidays 2018 social media video. The band was going to give away to the online Jamily, assuming YouTube, given its first demo, was shared there. But shortly after the upload of Now We Are Alone, which is a sprawling track, which sounded very, very promising when it came out, on the official Jamiroquai YouTube channel back in early 2018. The whole scheme ended up being abandoned without any further unreleased material being released via the Jamiroquai official social media or the official Jamiroquai YouTube channel. Now We Are Alone still stands on itself as a very interesting demo of a fully formed song that could have made a great bonus track on the latter released 2010 album Rock This Lifestyle album. And that is it for this very long episode, very provisional episode of JamiroFan Talks About, the omnibus of the great unreleased side of Jamiroquai and all their unreleased music. Now, if there's any music I missed in this very long-winded episode, please feel free to share the backstory, the context on whatever song I missed down in the YouTube comments section of this episode. It would be greatly appreciated. But I pretty much went off of my old Unreleased Of QUAI, Rarities of Jamiroquai 1991 through 2023 collection, resource guide aforementionedly, of the many resource guides I've released on my Google Docs for the online Jamily for the benefit of the archival sense. So if you'd like to check out that release for yourself of my Unreleased Of QUAI, I'll be sure to put a link additionally down in the description area of this episode of JamiroFan Talks About, so you can check it out in your own time. And I'll be sure to check out all my releases if you can, because there is so much about Jamiroquai that at least members of the family who have not done their full exploration of the band's music and their history have yet to know. And hopefully this will be the beginning of some more long-form omnibus episodes of JamiroFan Talks About in the future if I have the time. But I hope you enjoyed this first experience of this new kind of JamiroFan Talks About episode, where I talked more into detail and more deep diving into the unreleased music of Jamiroquai from the last 32 years of their musical history. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe and ding the bell on your YouTube to stay up to date on all the latest new content coming from the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel. I will fully endeavor to keep bringing you all the latest news about the band members and, of course, the band Jamiroquai when it becomes available, when I can. But as always, this is JamiroFan 2000. Thank you again, everybody, for 1,700 subscribers on YouTube. I appreciate I am very humbled, and I appreciate everybody watching my videos. See you again really soon with more Jamiroquai-related videos here on the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you around.